This is Welcome to Sound and Delivery. Um, it is just me, Chris Glanister, here for this particular session. Joel Tepp is off doing something else. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but he's not here, and so we'll continue on anyway. Today, I would like to talk about a couple of topics that are a bit of a continuation from the last show that we did. Specifically, I want to talk about monitors and the effects on monitors, monitor sound, and stage sound in general. And then after that, we're going to talk about one of my kind of pet peeves, really, and that is stage plots. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But thanks for joining us, and hopefully we'll get some good information out here. It's going to be a bit of a monologue, as the fact that it's just me, and Joel is not going to be here to either correct me or pepper me with questions that I may or may not be able to answer. However, we will continue on anyway. So let's talk about monitors. What is a monitor? And two things I should say, first of all. My general disclaimer is that this is how I do sound. This is how I've done sound. Other people do it differently and do it well. So this is my perspective as opposed to somebody else's. And secondly, I think it is again my opinion, and hopefully you'll figure out that this works or not. And we'll see how this goes. So let's talk about what a monitor is. A stage monitor is simply a means to, oh, I know what the other thing was, excuse me. I'm going to be pretty elementary, start in as in what a monitor is, how it works, some things like that, so that please forgive me if it is too elementary for you. So let's talk about what a stage monitor is. I got a cool picture here. This is a kind of a cool shot of a stage monitor here. I got this from Wikipedia, and it kind of looks like what sometimes my stage looks like. So you can get a sense of what it is. A stage monitor gives you the ability to receive audio back to you on stage. A stage monitor is different in how it sounds and how it is set up, and we'll get into that in a moment. But more importantly, it gives the musician a way of monitoring, that's the word monitor, monitoring how they sound, and also to get things set up a little different from how they are out front. Often the mix out front is not necessarily something that you as a musician want to hear, because you may need to have very different types of sounds. So with that in mind, this is what we're going to do. So a monitor is typically a speaker that we typically run about, I know it. I should mention that I've got my good friends Deb Ewing and Barbara on the other end watching this, and they will critique me later. I know that for a fact, however. So a monitor is going to be a speaker that has a horn and a woofer, if you will, typically around 12 inches. The 15s tend to be really large and too much. And you can have, I think I have done up to 9 or 11 monitor mixes, a lot. And we'll talk about what a monitor, what those are in general. They can be in front, they typically are in front of a person or persons, and they can actually show up not just as a physical speaker, but they can also show up as, for instance, an in-ear monitor. There is another kind of monitor called a side fill, and that quite literally is a monitor speaker that is off to either side of the stage, and it fills in the sound. Not used that much anymore. But typically it's in the bigger stages with a lot more sound, that's typically been done. But nowadays I don't see too much call for it. So we really don't mess with that too much. The monitors are designed a little bit differently in that they really are designed to focus sound in front of you, not to the side, but not to the front. And so it's going to give you a very focused stream, if you will, a field of sound for you to listen to. And that also depends upon the kind of microphone that you use, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too. But so you're on stage, you've got a monitor in front of you, and I'm standing there, or maybe I'm back at a console somewhere, and I'm talking to you about monitors and what we want to get out of that monitor. There are a couple of things I want to talk about first of all, and that is how a monitor sounds. And this is something pretty critical. And that goes into a basic philosophy of sound on stage, which is this. If you don't get the sound of monitors, the monitor sound set correctly and the stage sound set that you as a musician want, it's not going to work out very well. You as a musician, and I've been there as a musician as well, it's not going to sound good, and it's going to put you on edge. It might make you angry. It might. It's not going to get you playing the best that you can, and so consequently, your performance really isn't going to go that well, or it's going to have some issues, or you're going to muddle through it, kind of a thing. But we all know that bad stage sound is kind of a fact of life if you're a musician. But what we're going to talk about is hopefully that we can actually mitigate that in a bunch of different circumstances. So my personal philosophy is this: if I don't get the stage sound right, then we're really not starting on the right foot. And really, why are we doing this? Because it's critical that you as a musician get the sound that you want on stage. What that means is that when you as a musician hear, and I can see this. I'll give you an example. I'm doing a festival. There's a band in front of me that I've never seen before, and we get our monitor set up, and everyone's happy. And I then watch. Now, they've never been on my stage before, and I've never seen them before. So what happens is that the band just sort of, or the musician, collection of musicians, starts playing, and immediately the assumption is that it's not going to be good. And so the volumes may vary, and they might just be a little jittery. And then as the sound kind of, as people realize that the sound is good, it works, it's nice, and you can see the band just kind of relax into the sound. And that is, of course, when you're doing a festival, when we've got 10 minutes to turn a band, to go from one band to another. And so it's very quick and easy. If it's a big show somewhere, we're going to spend some time ahead of time getting our monitors correct. And even then, but still, when you start doing the show, when you hear the front of house and the audience is there and everything is the way it should be, you can just see the musicians go, and relax and off to a great show. And that's what we want. We want that. Especially if you do this enough to the point where musicians, as a sound person, musicians know what you can do, then they're going to walk in and go, hey, this is cool. And they relax immediately because they know it's going to work out just well, just great. And we don't have to go through the preliminaries. They just know that we're going to get it right. But we want to talk about, in the process of this, how to get those sounds, and also to talk about what monitors are, and how they differ from what we're going to call front of house, which is the mix that the audience receives. So they are, first of all, they're designed just to be in front of you and to just project sound at you. Now, it could be that in a situation where is a small stage or fewer monitors, it's one monitor for multiple people. And we'll kind of kick into that a little bit later. But let's assume that it's a 4-piece band, okay? Drums, bass, guitar, and keys. Is that 4? My typical standard setup is basically what we would call 5 monitor mixes. And that would be four monitors along the front, and then one in the rear. That would be 4 drums. Now, the drum monitor typically ends up being a little bigger. We want some bigger sounds, and especially when the drummer wants to put, say, kick through the monitor, some things like that. So it's going to produce a little bit more sound. It'll be a little bit deeper in terms of sound. In some cases, I've seen where basically they'll put a subwoofer in front of by the side of the drummer, which I'm not going to go there. So that's a piece of how it is. So let's talk about how it's set up. On your mixer, be it analog or digital, there is a a section in there that says mix or monitors or aux, one of those two things. And it could be up to 1 to 4 to 6 to 16. It varies on the mixer. What it does is that one mix takes all of the inputs that you have and basically allows you to mix those inputs into a different output from the main output in front of the mixer, and that allows you to create a different mix from the front of house sound, and it is entirely separate. In other words, what I do on mix 1 is not going to affect anything in the front of house. Now, on most mixers that we use, there's a bunch of those. There's mix 1 through, let's say 8, okay? And on that, I can take mix 2 and I can create another mix that is different from mix 1 and again from the front of house. And I can take that, and it gives you then the ability to create a mix very specifically to the person in front of that speaker. This is cool in a lot of different ways. If you are, let's say, playing voice and guitar, and you've got a couple of vocalists on either side, you as that person will want to hear your voice and your guitar in the mix, but you want to hear a little bit of the other singers. And let's say you've got a keyboard and you want a little different mix of the keyboards, but let's say you've got a sax player further down the row in the stage, and he's loud enough to the point where you don't want any sax in your monitor. So you can do all of that. And it means that you create a custom mix. That means that's just for you. And that is very cool. It gives you then the ability to tailor what you need to do to hear what you need to hear to make it sound the way you want it to sound, so that you can do a great show. And it's the same whether it be an older analog mixer or a newer digital mixer. It really doesn't matter. The point is that you do have the ability to run as many monitor mixes as you can handle, basically. And if you go to a festival, sometimes there are going to be, 2 monitors if it's a very small stage, or a bigger stage will they run 4 to 5, those kinds of things. And again, it's going to depend upon where you are and what kind of a show that you're doing. In a coffee house, for instance, heck, you may just have one in front of you as opposed to a bunch, because it's a small stage in a corner or something like that. All of that ties into stage sound, which we will talk about later. But with that in mind, you've got a 5-piece band. You've got 4-piece along the front, then you've got a drummer. Okay, let's talk about what happens when you're up on stage and your sound person comes along and says, let's do some monitors. I have some ways I like to do monitors, and that is that I want to make sure that that I have some focus. In other words, what we don't want to do is to have everybody playing all at the same time. It's disconcerting at best. Because what we're going to be doing is we are going to be creating 5 different monitor mixes, and it'll start something like this. Let's say the main vocalist, Mr. Vocalist, how's the sound? How's the level of your voice in the monitor? Good. Level of your guitar in the monitor? Great. Okay. Now, Mr. Vocalist, how much of your backup, of your second vocalist do you want in your monitor? That much. How much of the other vocalist do you want in your monitor? How much, let's say, electric guitar do you want in your monitor? And we go through that person by person. Now, that's just one monitor mix. I then have to do the whole thing again for each of those mixes. And it takes some focus, and if you're doing it quickly, it actually takes some work to make sure that those mixes are right. And it takes a little bit of time. So now we're getting into perhaps the stagecraft portion of this, and that is really, how do you want, basically it's an attitude on stage more than anything else. We want to work together to cooperate to make this work. That means we want to focus. We want to make sure that we're getting what we need, and also that we're really not messing around, and especially in a festival, because if we want to start you on time and get you the whole set, it's going to take longer if things are a little loose. And so, but that is just me. Other people do it a different way, and it just works for me. So we've gone through that process, and that may take 10 minutes to, I don't know, 20 minutes, however long it takes to get that done. And it depends upon the level of proficiency of that sound person too. In my particular instance, I run all of my sound from a small tablet. I don't have a console. So in my case, I'm going to be standing right next to you on stage with my tablet, and I'm going to be working with you, listening to what the sound of that monitor is, and we're going to be working on that together. And then I'll walk over to the next person. We'll do the same thing, and then we'll walk through the whole process, and then off we go. Most of the time, we should get it right. But it may be a case where somebody will say, hey, Chris, can you bring up this? And we'll bring so my job at the beginning of the show is also to really make sure that I'm paying attention to cues from the musicians. It's really important because sometimes when the whole band comes in and something isn't quite right, they still can't hear themselves. It is critical that you get what you need. And if you need to have a little bit of that, great. Also be aware that at the same time, if you do too much of this, if we haven't done our job at the beginning, it just disrupts the show if you keep asking for stuff. Anyway, so one thing to point out is that I'm talking about a sound person that is also running monitors. In really big shows, you're going to have somebody off to the side of the stage, and there's going to be a whole nother console, and the microphone. All the microphone inputs all the sound inputs are split out, and one goes to the front of house mixer and the other one goes to the monitor mixer. They are entirely independent of each other. I've done this for many, many years. So they will sit, and in the older days, the console looks different. You're dealing with monitor mixes, and the hard thing about it from a sound person's perspective is that I am mixing a monitor that I literally can't hear, because I'm off to the side of the stage and there's a bunch of monitors on stage and I literally am unable to hear them. So I have what's called a cue monitor next to me. And so when I want to work on the lead singer's monitor, I'm going to hit a button that allows me to solo out his mix, and then on the mixer itself I then adjust that as we're working through the process, or as I am making adjustments as we go through the performance. Either way, on the bigger shows, that's very standard. Back in the days when it was analog, it was huge. It was a big, massive console, and fortunately now it's a lot smaller with the digital consoles. Most of my work, I don't have that the luxury of it, or I don't do that big of a work. So for the most part, we're really going to be talking about the front of house, the sound person doing that particular, doing all the sound. So that's thing one. Secondly, let's talk about the sound of the monitor itself. The monitor sound is very different. And I'm talking about how it is equalized, or the tonal mix of the monitor. I'm going to give you a picture of a monitor curve, if you will. Here we go. This is from a PreSonus, my PreSonus mixer, just a screenshot. And you'll notice in the graphic EQ here, you've got most of the lower end, this is basically volume versus frequency, and almost all of the low end is taken out. That's really, really important. And so a monitor isn't going to have a huge amount of bass, and we'll get to that in just a moment. And it's going to sound different from the front of house again, because what I have done is that I have matched the tonal quality of the monitor so that you get as much level out of your out of the microphone in front of it, and that way you get a good amount of level. If you're trying to get a huge amount of level because you have, let's say, not a lot of good hearing anymore, and that's not unusual, unfortunately, anymore. As we get older, we lose our hearing. And so a lot of times that means that you want more monitor in your face, more level. It is important and critical that I make sure that you have enough level so that you can do that. And that takes a bit of work. It takes equalizing the monitor so that we can get what's called gain before feedback. That's important. But going back to why there's no bass, the stage sound has, on the stage, you have all sorts of sound coming out of speakers. You've got your monitors, you have, let's say, guitar amps, you've got bass amps, and maybe a keyboard amp, and drums. So the level of volume, the volume on stage is critical. And a lot of times we need to make sure that we have to have everything above that. The problem here is that if you have too much of everything, it just gets up to the point where it's very difficult to mix out of the front, because all that sound from the stage bleeds into the front, and you can hear all of that, and it bleeds into the microphones, and it's just not particularly great. So what we want to be able to do is to make sure that we don't have a huge amount of the low bass. It's hardly used, it's not necessary, but what it does is that it takes care a lot of the boominess, and more importantly, a big bass wave is physically large. The amplitude or the size of that wave is measured in feet, and if you've got a stage and maybe that's enclosed slightly, if you get all those big bass sounds banging away inside, it just creates a lot of mud. It gets rid of any coherence in the sound that you might have. So first thing we do is we take out that low end, and then we optimize it so that you can hear voices and instruments well. So it's going to be equalized a little bit different than the front of house, because the important thing is you need to be able to hear what is going on. And so I'm going to change that just a little bit so that maybe the upper mids are a little bit sharp, clearer, so that you can hear that voice. What most of us don't want to do, and this is where it gets a little sensitive, is that what we're really not going to do is to change the EQ of that monitor, because it then will affect everything else that we do. There's a little bit that we can do, but if you say, you know, can you give me more something or other and give me a little bit less bass in the guitar, I'm going to change the equalization on that on the guitar channel. I'm not going to change it on the monitor itself, and that becomes pretty important, because you've got 4 monitors within, let's say, a few feet of each other. If you've got a lot of bass bouncing around, again, it's just going to be very muddy and very incoherent, and it's going to make things a lot louder as well, because remember, the sound goes out of a monitor into the microphones, and it, to a certain extent, gives a little bit of feedback as well. So it's critical that you have decent levels, and decent levels on stage. Let's talk about positioning of monitors. I'm going to bring this one up here for a second here. I've just gotten some pictures from the internet, and we're going to talk about this a little bit here. So you can see the person is standing directly in front of the monitor. You'll see that it's angled up towards the upper part of the person. That's pretty normal, so that you're aiming the sound at that person. And you've got a microphone that is pointing away from the monitor. This is really important. The cardioid, in this case, supercardioid, which we'll get to if you get into in a minute. You look at the pattern. You'll see that kind of heart-shaped picture and the diagram in front of it. You'll notice that there's not a lot of sound in the back of the microphone. That's what a cardioid pattern does. It rejects the sound from the back of the microphone. So most things coming from the monitor get rejected and don't go into that monitor. It is by no means perfect. Just it's how we actually get some good sound levels coming out of the monitor. If you have an omnidirectional microphone, That is simply not going to work. There's a reason why we don't use omnidirectional microphones on the stage, because they will pick up everything from everywhere and you really can't get much level out of it. You'll notice that on the right hand side you'll see a little different pattern, and it's called a supercardioid. Supercardioid means that it's a little thinner and it's a little bit more focused than the standard cardioid. Certain microphones, and that is how the microphones are built. So some microphones are cardioid, some are supercardioid. And what that means, they get a better level of rejection. In other words, it rejects less sound from the sides and less sound from the back. And it gives you a little bit more clarity and sometimes a little bit more volume. Both are good. Most of the microphones that you will see out there are going to be one of those two. There is another version of cardioid called hypercardioid, but we don't typically use that on a stage. So understand that getting a mix means that getting it right at the beginning is good, because I'm not going to be mixing those levels during the show. Unlike if you have a monitor mixer on the side, they will be doing a lot more active work. I can't do that. So getting that level at the beginning is really, really important. Want to make sure that that bleeds into how you talk to your sound engineer about monitors. This is how not to do it. I was doing a show somewhere, and had a couple of guys on stage, and I'm standing there getting some monitors and asking them the usual questions. Does that work? And they go, Mr. Sound Guy, my friend needs to have more 2K in his monitor. That's 2000 hertz. And that's not how you talk to me. First of all, I know that. And secondly, back to what I said, we typically don't change the equalization of the monitor. You can tweak it a bit, but it just gets into trouble, because once you've done that, you've now upset the balance between the level of the microphone and the level of the monitor, which I have so carefully taken care of. The equalization is important in that it takes into account the surroundings, where the sound is bouncing off of things on the stage, or being absorbed, much like front of house. It's critical that that be done right. So we don't want to go there. So what do we want to do when you walk up on stage and I or somebody else is there and we start talking about monitors? The most important thing I can really recommend is that you really know what you want. Specifically, you want what specific instruments you want in your monitor, and specifically what levels you want. And that takes a little bit of time. Once you do a show, once you get a performance, you can, if you think about it as you're up there and people are giving you monitor mixes, you can get a sense of what works and what doesn't. And it becomes important that you do just that you make sure that you can ask the right questions of the sound person. And it's my responsibility to get them for you. So it's going to go something like this. Okay, Mr. Vocalist, how is that level in your monitor? Oh, okay. Why don't you sing for me a bit? And we'll sing. Okay, take that down a little bit. No, okay, that's good. No, down a little bit further. Okay, that's good. Now we'll bring in the guitar, for instance. And how's the guitar in that mix with the voice? And we'll work on that, and we'll move it around and so forth. And then we'll check with the other instruments and so forth. But you see, the point is that we're getting a mix that is comfortable for you as the musician. And again, it really becomes important that you know exactly what you want. One thing I do not recommend is that I often get this: bring it up a little bit, down a little bit, up a little bit, down a little bit, nope, up a little bit more, down a little bit. And this goes on for a while, and I just get frustrated, because realistically, that is a sign that you really are not quite sure what you want. So because we're doing small incremental changes, and while that is important, it again goes back to make sure you know what you want. because most of the time, I don't care what the speaker is and who's doing it, it's going to sound pretty much the same. In other words, you're going to get a clean, hopefully get a clean sound with not a huge amount of bass in it that you can listen to the sound of your instrument and your voice. And you can then say, that guitar is a little boomy. What can we do about that? And I'll mess around with the EQ a bit and say, hey, how's that? Oh, that's much better. See my point? A lot of times, Mixer will have it so that I can change the mix, the tonal quality or the tonal quality of that instrument, of that input, separately from the front of house. So what I do coming through the monitor is different from front of house. And that's important because sometimes what you as the musician want the guitar to sound like is going to be different from what I want the guitar to sound like when I put all the rest of the band in. And so it becomes important that we have that ability. So that's pretty common as well. Be focused about what you want and get it as quickly as we can. Again, we don't usually have a lot of time on stage, and there's not a lot of time to waste. And there's other people waiting to do other things and to make sure that they get their mixes as well. So really, within your band, it's kind of cool to have a plan to say, hey, let's get you first. Let's get you first. Sometimes that works. And then that way, walking in the door, knowing what you want, again, and I've said it a few times now, is really, really important. And just making sure that it's just professional. We're making sure that making sure that is that's correct. And oh, here we go. I've got a question from the audience. So you're saying that the monitor mix is not intended to show the performer how the mix sounds out front? Absolutely, that is correct. It is not the same mix at all. Now, there is one. I've come across people that will say, I want to hear what the front of house sounds like. That's actually not that easy to do. And that means that I actually have to mix you a bunch of times, keep mixing, and that's not going to work. So yeah, it's going to be an entirely different mix, and it's going to solve a different purpose. It is to give you, the musician, the ability to get the levels that you need to hear your instruments and the voices. And it is going to be very different from the front of house. How I mix 3-voice, for instance, is going to be entirely different from how you want to hear it. Your voice, you're going to say, oh, I want most of me and a little tiny bit of that other person, and even less of that person. Or I want it all balanced. The point is that it's what you're used to, and that's important. There's another piece of this that I want to talk about, and that is that you've got, and this now I'm morphing into the overall level of the stage, and this becomes another big important thing to consider in all of this. So in most situations, you're standing behind a sound system. There's a whole bunch of speakers and out front. I was at an open mic Monday. We were down visiting a friend, and there were a bunch of speakers out front. It was in it was a lovely place, but there were and I'm playing a penny whistle, which is a low, quiet instrument, and all I got from the back of the speaker was this huge boomy bass, and I couldn't hear a darn thing. And it was disconcerting, and I tried to play the whistle, and I literally couldn't hear myself. And therefore, I couldn't really do what I needed to be able to do. It was tough to kind of go back through to kind of push on through that and try to deliver a decent performance. What happens is that speakers don't push sound all the way out front only. They push, there is sound that comes around the back, and mostly bass. There's not a lot of high end. So what you hear on stage is the monitors. You're hearing the sound of the speakers from the back, and also the sound of the speakers out front bouncing off of other things. So you're hearing the sound of the room plus the sound of the stage. That's why it becomes important to make sure that that monitor is coherent, so that you can get away from the muddiness that is. I was talking to a friend of mine and who does bigger sound than I do, and he just got a new system of speakers that are called cardioid. Notice the microphone display that we talked about. And they're built such that you can hear nothing behind it. And some people can't stand that because we are so used to hearing the sound of the room and the sound of the space and the sound of the stage. And I prefer that. I actually listen to what's going on out there, and part of my listening, and so I don't like a lot of monitor. And that's another point, is that some people don't like much monitor at all. They tend to listen more to the front of the house than the monitor itself. Some people don't want to hear a darn thing. So they want a lot more monitors in front of them so they can hear it. It's all personal preference. It's all what you like and what you don't to make sure that the performance is what it should be. It's entirely subjective. And the point being is that you want to make sure that you know what you want. I keep coming back to that because it's critical. And that, as I said, takes some time and some thought and some discussion. Talk to the sound person away from, not on stage, but have a conversation with me about, ask questions, say, what do you think? Ask me questions, get yourself used to, can you do this? Can you do that? What kind of tonal quality can I expect? Those kinds of things. If it's offline, then we can, that hopefully helps you get a better picture of what you need. For touring artists, this becomes really, really important because you don't know what you're walking into when you're touring. So you show up on a stage. You just came into town, and we start doing sound checks, and we have not met. And so for the hour or so, or however it takes that we're budgeted to spend time getting monitor mixes right, they have to be right on the money. They have to know what they want and know how to get it quickly, and importantly, know how to ask for a different, let's say, level of expertise from a sound person. Sometimes they're dealing with somebody who doesn't know much, or somebody that really knows. And so another piece of the puzzle here is, how do you talk to somebody at different levels of competence? And that is important too. Sometimes you almost have to explain it to somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, or isn't very experienced in it, to just saying, hey, I want more of this, more of this. Develop a dialogue, develop a way of talking to different people and asking those questions without insulting the sound person or annoying them, or just being rude. That happens to me, believe it or not, a lot more than you think. And we all want to be professionals, and we all want to make sure that it's right. So walking in the door onto stage, with all of us having an attitude of, one, professionalism, and two, really wanting to make sure everything's right and working for you, the musician. More questions. Yeah, the question is, are there things you can say politely that help each of you figure out the level of the person's experience? That's a hard one. Let's say I'm the musician and I walk on stage, and first thing I'm going to do is kind of look to see what the stage is like and kind of see what they're doing. That's going to tell me something right there. If they're just, and what they're going to say to me at the beginning is important. So they'll say, okay, bring, a lot of times, let's say you've got 3 monitors in front, and let's just keep it simple and easy for that. 3 monitors in front, it's 3 people, it's a 3-piece band. Let's do that. And so a lot of times what you want to be able to do is to actually take charge of it. If it's a person with a little less competence, quietly and gently take charge of things. In other words, you could say, okay, Mr. Sound Person, can I have a little bit more vocal in my monitor? And you can say, hey, let's focus on my monitor, and could you give me a little bit more of my vocal? Okay, good, that's great. Now you want to take that down a little bit, and if it's too much, you can say, just don't quite give me that much, but gently. What you don't want to do is to be, it needs to be gently and carefully, to make sure that you don't upset those people. They're trying the best they can, basically. Whereas opposed to a person with a lot more experience, you can say, "Yep, give me a little bit of vocal, give me some more vocal. That's great, cool, thanks," and then we move on. Then you can say, "Okay, for my friend over for my friend over here, let's look at his monitor and let's get a little bit more of their level." And okay, hey, do you have 3 separate monitor mixes? That's something important, because sometimes you'll walk into a place where you've only got 1 monitor mix, but 3 monitors, 2 monitors. In which case, all of it's going to be the same. So yeah, you want to establish that right off the bat to make sure that what you're dealing with. Point being is that be comfortable taking a little bit of taking charge of how things go. As a musician, I've done that a lot. And that means that you want to be on the ball with your band and make sure that, say, okay, I'm done with this. Now, hey, Bob, let's get your monitor sorted out. Okay, let's move to this monitor here. And can you bring up his voice a little bit more in that monitor? It's going to take more time, but doing it gently and carefully and as professionally as we can really uplifts everyone. And that's really the point, because sometimes they just simply don't know that much and they're willing to learn. And so a lot of times coming along, let's say, it's a small club or a coffee house or something like that. These people are volunteers, and working together on that just uplifts everyone and makes sure that everyone's happy. And more importantly, you're teaching that person something, and that's important as well. So in a lot of ways, you end up being a little bit more of you end up being a bit of a teacher, and that's important too. Moving on to the overall stage sound. It is very important to make sure that you don't have a huge amount of sound. My biggest problem on a stage is that sometimes I've got too much sound, and it's very hard to mix the front of house over the top of that. That comes down to the drummer being very loud, and there's too much volume coming out of the guitar amps, and sometimes just very loud monitors. An example, I was doing a show a bunch of years back. It was some country band, and the woman in front was singing, and I'm doing front of house, and there's a monitor mixer around the corner, and I'm mixing away, and she starts singing, and she gets up to a high note, and she does not make it to the top of that note. The pitch doesn't make it there, and she continually does this, and there's only so much I can do to either bury it, change it. I can't really get that sound to be quite right. So I'm wondering what's going on, and I'm noticing at this point that it's just loud. I mean, really loud. And I'm looking at a bunch of musicians. So at some point I stopped, I walked around to the side, and I went to the side of the stage, and the level was just horrific. It was just terribly loud. 6 monitors, and it's just loud. And I've got a bunch of musicians angry because it's so loud. Their ears are hurting. They can't play properly. And I realized what was going on. The vocalist must have had basically had lost her hearing. She couldn't hear much. And a lot of what happens with that, you need to have more volume in your face. But she just generally brought everything up because that was what she was comfortable with. And again, you be cognizant of that. In my world, I'm a folk musician. There's a lot of older folks, and those folks have hearing damage from many years on stage. And it's a conversation that you need to think about sometimes, in realizing that some of the reasons why you have a loud monitor in front of you or a loud stage level is because there's hearing loss. And it's something that you need to consider in all of this. And finally, talk with the band about making sure that that the level of the amplifiers is reasonable. What I will say to a band is this: hey, can I get that guitar down a little bit, but please make sure that you get the tone you want. That's really important. But can you bring it down? Results are mixed depending on who the band is. But and I'll say then, if you do that, then I can do the heavy lifting, because a lot of times if the bass amp is so loud, it's so loud and it kicks all the way out front, and I literally can't mix it because it overpowers everything and I can do nothing. And so therefore I've lost the ability to make sure that band sounds as good as I can get it. That's pretty critical in my world, making sure that stage level, which is the sound of the monitors and the sound of the other amplified instruments on stage, and also the sound of the drums. A great drummer or a good drummer has the ability to change his volume depending on the venue. If it's a small thing, I've seen him just drop down and play with the right amount of tone and attack, but less volume. Sometimes they'll use something called thundersticks, which gives a little softer tone. Not all, a bunch of guys don't like it. But again, as a band, be flexible and realize that if you've got somebody you know, give me what I need so that I can give you a great mix, both in monitors and out front. So I want to do finally one little piece about monitors. I want to have a quick chat about in-ears. They're called IEMs sometimes. These are the little monitors that go in your ear, and typically they're wireless, but not always. And they've been around for a while, but I am starting to see a lot more. In a festival situation, it's really difficult to deal with in-ears because of the setup. It's hard to deal with, and at the same time, a lot of years we would say, "Yeah, nope, sorry, can't do it," because it was hard to do when you're dealing with a really fast mix. But I'm getting more requests from folks because they have such substantial hearing damage that they're now using in-ears to compensate for that. Think of it as an onstage hearing aid, if you will. And by the way, hearing aids on stage do not mix. Don't go there. They don't work. Because when you have a hearing aid, you listen to, it's a wall of sound. You can't discern the difference between instruments, and it's very hard to deal with. So in-ears become a tool that allows you to, one, protect your hearing, and two, especially in huge venues, when you're in a stadium or a big room, you absolutely need to have those because so that you can get a clean and clear mix of what you need. There's two ways to have them. You can have them in both ears, and what that does is it shuts everything out. And that means that all you're hearing is your ecosystem, whatever your monitor mixer is feeding you. So if a lot of times what they'll do, they'll have a couple of microphones out front and in the band that just pick up the sound of the band and the sound of the audience, and they feed that in to your monitor mix so that you can hear what's going on. It gives you a picture of what's going on. I don't like that. If I'm using in-ears, I have one ear on and one ear off. That way I can hear what's around me, but I've got one in-ear that allows me to hear. And I like using in-ears. It's great when you've got full control over it, but it's not that easy when you're doing a festival and we have to really take care of that in a short amount of time. So if you're going to do that, way ahead of time, talk to your sound person and say, "Hey, I'm bringing some in-ears. Well, is that going to work? How are we going to do it?" And talk about that. Talk about what's reasonable. And I'm going to say that if the sound person is a really competent sound person, they'll say, "Yeah, sure, we can work that out." And we talk about how we're going to do that and how we're going to set it up ahead of time. You may want to, for instance, deliver the system to me ahead of time so I can set up the transmitter where I need it to be, and basically be ready for it. And I'll put it on a monitor, a mix that I'm not using. And then I'm just going to mix it like I would a monitor. I'm going to stand in front of you or whatever. I'm going to say, "Okay, I'm going to bring that up and bring that down." And we'll take it from there. So it's an important thing to do. Again, prepare yourself. Make sure that you know what you want to say, how you're going to operate as a band, and do that in a professional way. And I think we'll get along. And I think that more importantly, we'll get a great sound. To me, that's really what it's about. It's making sure that you as a musician get what you absolutely can so we can really make some great music together. Okay. Got a little bit more time, and I want to move on to one final thing. This won't take too long, but I do want to talk about it, and that is stage plots. Stage plots, tech sheets, same thing. They can be the bane of my existence, and they're incredibly important to have. And so what I want to talk about is just some of the ways to get me to give a good stage plot that a sound person is going to like and the sound person is going to use. If I'm doing a festival, I've got a sheet in front of me with a bunch of musicians, all of whom have a stage plot, and I'm going to go through that and look at to see and prepare myself for what's next. And so it becomes absolutely critical to me that the stage plot is accurate. And there lies the rub, and there lies the problem. I have had issues where I'll come to a show, and the band shows up, and they start setting up, and the first thing says, no, this isn't right. I'm over there, you're over there, and we're over there, and we don't want those monitors there. And I will have set it up exactly as the stage plot was done. And I spent half an hour or so doing that. And then they walk in, traffic is late because let's say this is a concert in the park, summer concert. And so traffic is bad here in the Seattle area. And so they're coming in a bit late. And so we have to run around and move things around. And that makes me kind of grumpy, frankly. And in this particular instance that I was thinking of, they had sent me a stage plot that they knew darn well was actually old and wasn't even current. It basically had musicians that weren't even with the band anymore, and that is not a good thing. Now the reality is that things move and change. Another another time, I was doing a big show, and at that level, when I'm doing shows where sometimes the sound person is coming in the door, traveling with the band, and I'm the contractor. I set everything up, and then I just sit on the stage and side of stage and make sure everything runs correct, make sure everything's good. At that point, my part of the show is pretty much done. The sound person takes over, and off we go. I walk in, and most of the time at that point, I'm getting the stage plots from the management company. That alone is gets to be funky at best, because they're just sending you out whatever they have on file. So I get the stage plot, and I set it all up, and it's, a lot of inputs, and everything's the way it should be. And I look at it, and I double check to make sure that I'm right. And then the band walks in the door, drives up, walks in the door, and they look at the stage, and I had made the mistake of taping everything down. That was my mistake. What you don't do is tape everything down until you're absolutely sure you're right. And so they said to me and looked me in the eye and said, we're so sorry, but you need to flip the whole thing 180 degrees, because the management had basically made it up. It was incorrect. Literally, the stage, the audience was in the wrong spot. Really not a good thing. So I'm going to show you some pictures here. This is my favorite picture of a stage plot. I'm going to bring this up here. I was doing a festival, specifically the Juan de Fuca Festival one year, and this was the stage plot I got, just like that. And from a musician, a wonderful musician by the name of Del Rey from the Seattle area. She's a wonderful musician, and I'd known her for quite a long time, and I get this, and she hadn't shown up yet, and she comes in the door, and I'm looking at this going, what the heck is this? And I said, okay, Spill, what's this? And she goes, oh, she says, that's the shot that's from above me, that's my hair, and the other thing is the microphone. And I fell out laughing. It was brilliant. It turns out actually that there's a mutual admiration society regarding that one, and a lot of sound guys just actually have made T-shirts out of that. I thought it was brilliant. It was funny and quirky and really cool. Really cool in how things are done. I want to talk about what we want to see on a stage plot. First of all, we want to know how many inputs. We want to know how many vocal microphones you want, how many DIs you want, how many XLRs you want, how many, and in some cases, how many monitors you want. And that varies depending on who you are and whether you're touring or not or something like that. And then also whether you want power at your spot on the stage, AC power for whatever you need. All that stuff needs to be there. A picture is worth 1,000 words in this particular case. A lot of times I'll get a list, and that works to a point. But frankly, when we're rushing through things and we're looking quickly, I want to see a pretty simple understanding of what we want. I'm going to throw out some programs. There are some great programs, by the way, out there that allow you to do it, and I should talk about those next. In fact, let me find that little graphic here. And here it is. Okay, so this is what's out here. First up is Microsoft Paint. If you're a PC user, I have been using it for years that way, and it's very quick and easy, and you can do a stick figure and a stick figure of a boom microphone, and you can make a very clean plot. What I'll do is I'll put arrows at the bottom where I was, and I'll say XLR or DI or whatever that happens to be. But you need to be very specific. If, for instance, you bring your own DI, you'll want to say that. You'll say DI, and then you'll want to say in the notes, I'm bringing my own DI. I'm going to supply one anyway, but it's good courtesy to say that to a sound person. So we don't have to, we just simply put an XLR there for you. XLR, by the way, being just the end of a microphone cable. Believe it or not, again, it's Microsoft stuff, but something in Publisher. It's a great, very simple and easy desktop publishing program that you can do. So just bringing stuff in. I've done that as well. There's at least one app for a phone, and that's called Stage Plan Master by Pelix or Pelix. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, and that exists in your app store, either on Android or in iOS. Then there are 3 programs that are out there. One is StageBlockGuru.com, TechWriter.com, and BossRadioTX.com, and I forget, and it's called Stage Plot something or other, and I didn't do that right. I'm going to leave this up for a while as we talk about it, so that you can take a note, and if you go back later, you can make a note of this. What's cool about these is that they have a preset frame, and then they've got a whole bunch of graphics of different instruments, and you can drag and drop those things into your stage plot, and then you can print it out. Print it out as a PDF or a JPEG or whatever you want. And it's really nice. You can move it around, and you can move it, and you can label it. And let's say you can say I want 3 saxes, or a sax and a trumpet, and so forth. And then, there's a picture of a horn. What I see a lot of is TechWriter, is Stage Plot Guru. I see a lot of that. That's actually one of the more popular ones. I see that a lot. These are great. They're free, and they work well. But again, and also at the bottom, you can put a list of inputs. You can say, you've got a vocal, you've got 3 vocals, and sometimes if in the case of a bigger thing, they'll list what microphones they want or they're going to bring, those kinds of things. So some other details. You might list, for instance, that one of the main vocal is a wireless microphone that you are bringing. Those kinds of things, or it could be a headset mic that for the drummer, those kinds of things. Those details are really important, and if you can do that, that's great. Also, sometimes a picture really is worth 1,000 words. I was doing a show this summer where it was a couple, but they had like 50 million instruments. One was there was a hammered dulcimer. There was a bouzouki. There was all these instruments, and they sent me a photograph of the whole stage as to how they laid their instruments out. That was huge. I thank them for it. A lot of times that's not necessary, but what I'll actually do, if I know the band, I'll go to their YouTube channel and look for YouTube pictures of them so that I can see how they lay their stage out, if it's something I have the time to do that. Obviously, in a festival, that is not going to work. But you can see how important this is. The reality is that it is a guide, but you want to give me as much information and as clear and as cleanly as you can. I'm going to show another picture here. This is my stage plot that I send out to clients here. It's just, it basically is a bunch of questions at the top, and you can make a check mark or write some notes, and then it gives you a picture of the stage. And then on the left-hand side, there's one B for boom. You can just put a B in there, or however you want to do it. It's a simple and clean way. What I will do for a lot of my clients, I will send them this, and they then send that out to folks and then send them back to me. It's got important things like the day of show phone contacts, those kinds of things. That's very important, so that if you're late, I'm going to call you and find out where the heck you are. Those kinds of things. Also, my phone number and information, so that ahead of time you can call me and say, "Hey, come on, how about I'm going to use some in-ears? Is that okay?" Those kinds of things, and then you can ask me questions. For instance, is there a backline? A backline being a set of like a guitar amp and a bass amp, maybe a keyboard or drums that is set up for the whole festival. And so the band doesn't have to bring those instruments. Those are questions that we want to field ahead of time without having to deal with them on the day of. Like, well, I thought you had a guitar amp. Didn't you? No, that's not in the contract. Off topic somewhat, but that does happen. So I'm going to come back to me again here. Stage plots are really critical, and getting them done in a timely fashion is important. Sometimes it's just as easy as to fill it out and take a picture of it and send it back. That's with phones nowadays. Frankly, it looks great. If you don't have time to scan it and resend it or mail it or whatever, you can just send a picture. That works. I think there we have it. I hope that helps. I've got a couple of things. We do something every month called the microphone of the month, and I've got one here. This is not a particularly strange or esoteric microphone. It's like this. This is a shotgun microphone. This particular one is actually made by Audix. It's not made anymore. I just got it off of eBay. It's a UEM81, and UM81. And the cool thing about a shotgun is called because of their range. You could aim this microphone at something, and you could then pick up that sound from a distance. The length of the microphone, and I'm going to unscrew this because this one does. This is the microphone part here. This is the microphone. This is the body. And what's cool about this particular one is that I can put a different cartridge on it. I now have, for instance, a super cardioid microphone like this, and I can put that on. This particular one is battery only. A lot of times I'll use these, for instance, let's say I'm doing a storyteller, and that storyteller wants to talk, but they don't want a microphone in their face. So I've got a little distance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to point that microphone further away from them, and I am going to use it so that I can, let's say it's going to be down here. Well, that's going to pick that microphone, that's going to pick that sound up a lot easier and a lot quicker from further away. And it gives me then the ability, to pick up that voice, but not have the microphone in their face. I love this little thing. I'm looking forward to using it. Audio Technica makes a lot of them too. I'm going to show you one more one. I have a pair of these. Last time I talked about the Electro Voice Endyme series. This is the same series, but with a longer shotgun. This note is a short one. This means that it doesn't pick up as far, but the coverage is also wider. In other words, the longer the coverage, the slimmer the pickup pattern is. It goes into what's called hypercardioid as opposed to cardioid. So the shorter the one, it's going to be a lot wider. I use these for audience microphones a lot, those kinds of things. Typically, they'll have a pop filter on, which is a big gray foam thing. They degrade over time, and I have to replace them, and I haven't replaced these ones yet. So that, therefore, is the microphone of the month. And as we wrap up, I want to first of all thank Deb Ewing and Barbara Denz for hanging out with me, and as Joel as well. We will be back next month with another topic yet to be decided, I suspect. And I want to mention too that all of these are actually archived at the and I'm going to bring this archived at this spot right here. That's youtube.com/@far-westlive.com/live. There you go at the bottom. And it's great because you can go back and check things out and listen to things. And we will be continuing on down the road, hopefully bringing you great content. Deb pointed out that I mentioned Audix. I'm a big fan of Audix microphones. And it so happens that I'm going to be playing with some brand new Audix microphones pretty shortly. I'm headed down to do the sound for the Far West Convention down in Vancouver, Washington in a couple of weeks. And I'm looking forward to that. A couple of weeks. A good time. I've done this before over the years, and it's always fun. I'll be doing the main showcase stage. We'll be doing another stage as well by one of my other folks, and making sure that we get the best possible sound that we can for anybody there, and also hanging out and having a good time. A big shout out to Far West and all of the folks that are volunteers. It is entirely a volunteer-run organization, and they do a heck of a job making sure that things get done and throughout the year. And of course, the panic that ensues getting ready for a big folk convention such as this. And so until next time, thanks for coming. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.